Hello! Welcome to our first official episode of Fine, I'll Watch. This is a podcast where we watch things that have been on our watch list forever that we just haven't seen for some reason. And we're watching a lot of sort of critically acclaimed or very beloved things because we want to get into it. We have FOMO. So this week we watched The Godfather. We are three people who studied film in college and have never seen The Godfather. Sort of hold your applause. We've never seen it, and we decided to rectify that this week. I'm going to give a quick little intro about The Godfather in case anyone doesn't know. In case you've never spoken to a man before in your life, I'll go ahead and fill that role for you. So this is a 1972 mafia film directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The screenplay is by Mario Puzo, who also wrote the book that the film is based on. It is set in the 1940s and 50s in New York when one of the heads of the five families is shot in the street and bedridden. His sons scramble to take over the family business while trying to both avoid war and avenge their father. This is an extremely popular movie. This is the ninth highest grossing movie of the 1970s, and since debuting 50 years ago has grossed over $100 million and counting, despite its reported $7 million budget. In addition to being well received by audiences, this is a film that is incredibly critically acclaimed. At the 1973 Academy Awards, The Godfather was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 3: Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. The Godfather Part 2 would go on to win 6 more, and The Godfather Part 3 would be nominated for another 7, but did not win anything. The Godfather, after its initial release, would release 2 additional films in the next 15 years, completing a trilogy, each scoring a 97, 96, and 66% on Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter, and yet we have not seen it. So yeah, let's get into it. Why haven't we seen it? I would say for me, just sort of in a grudge kind of way, it has sort of been taken over by men in film, and I think that I like not having seen it because it irritates them. And even though I've seen it now, I'll probably lie and say that I haven't seen it. So yeah, what about you guys?
I mean, unfortunately, it's like the exact same reason, just like being stubborn. Like, I think
Yeah,
most things I haven't seen was because I was like, I don't need to see it. And it's true, I don't need to see anything.
my whole life is people telling me to watch movies and me telling them that I'll add it to a list, but there is no list and I'll never watch that.
Very
That is
well,
Crazy.
how I
actually.
felt about The Godfather, though. I was like,
Mhm.
everyone is telling me to watch it, so out of spite, I don't want to watch it. And also, it's 3 hours long.
I saw all 7 seasons of The Sopranos. That's more than enough. I feel like I've paid my
Yeah.
dues.
This movie has been explained to me like a million times. I feel like I've seen it because of sort of like the film men. It does turn me off from it. I still watched it. So let's talk about initial impressions. Olivia, you said that you felt like it was a Sopranos episode. Did you feel it would be like that going into it? Was that something that you assumed, or was that something you picked up along the way?
Literally within the first second, I was like, so that's Tony Soprano. Got it. I'm making the connections of like character dynamics based on what I already knew and loved from The Sopranos. And that's how I was able to understand it so well. Because as Hailee and I were realizing as we're watching this, like that is a lot of white men that all look exactly the same. It is hard to differentiate between a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I saw The Sopranos beforehand because it made it a lot easier to watch.
Well, first of all, Olivia did not realize it was Al Pacino in there. I told her it was
No.
Al Pacino, and she went, "Oh, from Dog Day Afternoon." And I was like, "Oh, yes, from Dog Day Afternoon." But I was like, I thought that she didn't realize it was Al Pacino because she had seen him recently. And so she was like, "Oh,
Oh,
like I don't even recognize, like he looks so young." No, Dog Day Afternoon was not that long after that. I was like, "How did
no,
you?"
They're gonna take my degree back. Oh, it's
it's
gone.
It's
over.
gone.
It's
Um,
gone.
yeah, Isabelle, how did you feel going into it? Did you have any sort of, we've talked about being explained this movie. Did you have any ideas about it, any biases about it before you
I
went in?
mean, honestly, to be so honest, and I think this is also like really where like our majors separate. The people in my film, like the men in my film classes, they're not talking about The Godfather. They're talking about some French movie from 1942.
Oh, that's
Like,
worse.
so it's worse. It's like significantly worse. And so I had no idea, like I knew it was about the mafia, but I didn't really know what the plot was. So I mean, I knew like the iconic lines, but honestly, like in that opening scene, I was thinking of Zootopia. Uh,
That's crazy. That's a crazy.
that's
They're
I
gonna
was
take
thinking of
your
like
degree.
I was thinking of all the parodies. So like there's a Modern Family parody of The Godfather. They parody The Godfather in Zootopia. Like I was thinking of the parodies. But so no, I didn't really have I honestly went in and I was like, I will probably love this just because I love like male film major films.
Just ask you a question though, Isabelle. So like you said that you didn't know anything about the plot going into it. You've
Uh-huh.
seen the movie. Do you know anything about the plot?
Yes.
I don't. I fucking don't.
But no, I
No,
do.
that plot
I
go
get the plot.
crazy.
I do get the plot, but it did take me like because I watched it in two parts because it was long. It was
Well,
really long.
yes.
And so for the first hour and a half, I was like, I have no idea what's happening. I was like, I don't know who any of these people are. They all look the same. I don't get it at all. And then the second hour and a half, it like all clicked where I was like, oh, okay. Like this is what's happening.
Interesting.
But like it still was like a situation where like it took me a minute after I watched it. After I finished it, then I was like, oh, so he killed Sonny. And like that it was like trying to like piece that together a bit.
Yeah, I had like
Because they all look the same.
They all look the same and they
I
sound
had-
the same. And that's just yeah.
me and Olivia watched it together on Zoom, and
Mhm.
I was saying I felt like I like brushed my teeth, and the movie was playing in the background, but I wasn't really like I had shit to do. I was brushing my teeth, and I felt like I like missed like an hour of the movie. Something that was really interesting to me and Olivia when Marlon Brando died the first time.
Uh-huh.
We were like,
I was like
holy
fully like I
fuck.
watched
I
the first
was
hour and a half and I was like,
shook.
Mom, the Godfather's dead.
no, literally, we were like, how did we go this long without knowing that he dies in the first movie? And then we
Right.
were like, never mind. And
Well,
then we're
I
like,
was like,
oh
he
my
dies in the
God, how
first
did we
20
not
minutes.
know that he dies in the first?
But I was genuinely like, I was like, oh, so this is why this movie is good because they did something unexpected. I was like, I get it now. And then when they're like, he's alive, he's fine, I was like, damn it, I thought they were gonna stick to their guns because that would have been really cool.
The $100 million, that's really not that much. Ninth grossing is really not that impressive.
It's not, but when you put it up against the other like movies
Yes,
in the
100
70s.
Yes, $100 million was much more money in the 70s.
I'm like, is she being sarcastic? Like, that's huge.
No,
What do you
it's
mean?
grossed $100 million over time. Its box office opening was like itty bitty teeny tiny. Like
Yeah.
I think it was literally like $300,000, which obviously when you consider like inflation is more like
Yeah.
in today's standards. However, that's really not that's really not that much. It definitely seems like this is the sort of film that maybe didn't have a super hard launch, but perhaps it obviously has longevity. I mean, we're talking about it. The first movie came out 50 years ago. Something to consider.
And we're talking about it because we feel forced. Imagine the people that are talking about it because they love it.
Olivia and I were sitting there and she was not aware of how long this movie was. And she was like, oh my God, wouldn't this be the climax of the movie? And I was like, I didn't know where we were like time marker wise. And I was like, oh, this is probably the false climax. And then I was like, oh my God, it's a midpoint. There's a whole other movie after this. Michael was really just kind of like doing whatever for a long period of time in this film. He was whoring
Yeah, like,
around.
He was supposed to,
yeah.
kind of, but he was supposed to be like the other man. Like, he was supposed to be audience reception, I feel like, where he's like, that's my father's business, not mine. And then
Yeah.
very quickly, because he got slapped in the face, this is my
Yeah.
business, not just my father's.
Man.
That is weak. We can all agree that is weak,
Man.
right? You got slapped in the face,
Well,
dude.
even
Like,
the other guy was like, "You're gonna do all of this because he hit you across the
Yes.
face."
Well, guys,
Sonny
like,
was
oh,
like
yeah.
laughing at him.
it took that bruise like 5 years.
Oh
to
my
heal.
God, yes. I was
That
like
was
literally
so
when I was watching
stupid.
the wedding, I was like, is that just his face? Have I not noticed that?
Well, Olivia was like,
Oh,
did he
there were
get
a couple
punched
scenes-
again?
No, there was a couple of scenes where it was like a little more died down than the scene after. So I was like, timeline wise, like your makeup artist did not do a good job because
Well,
I thought you had a
no.
second bruise.
It was like years later, I feel, and it was still like his. Also, time was crazy in this movie.
Time was crazy. He got married and she died in a span of
10 minutes.
It says on the, I was looking at it because I thought that this took place over like, a couple of years. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to take place over like 10 years.
Yeah.
So let's assume perhaps that he was in Italy for a while.
but they only aged Marlon Brando.
They only aged Marlon Brando, and he has this. I'm like, he must bruise like a peach. Like, this is
Yeah.
crazy. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, that's crazy. Me and Olivia enjoyed how he basically was just like, whose hot piece of ass daughter is that?
No,
And then he was
for
like,
real.
the dad was like, what the hell? And he was like, oh, like,
Oh,
first of
respect.
all,
That's your hot piece of
so
ass.
sorry. I'm so
I'm
sorry I said that.
sorry.
First of all, up top. But
Yeah.
second of all, the midpoint in this movie is really interesting in that it like completely changes the rest of this movie. How did you guys feel about the back half? How do you feel about the end of this movie? Isabelle, I know you were stewing on it for a while.
I'd also like to preface that I literally went to go see It Ends With Us and then came back and watched an hour and a half of the
Range. She has range.
So the first half I was like bored. And then the second half I watched last night and I was like, this is fascinating. I was like, this is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. I didn't think that. But I was like, it is good, and I do get it. By the second half, I could pick out who the characters were more and like their relationships to one another, which I didn't really get in the first half.
I was going to ask, and how do you feel about Justin Baldoni as a director? The first half, of It Ends With Us, it was kind of dragging, but by the end, you really got
It is true. It's the same length.
But
They're
I
both
get it,
3
but I get
hours
it.
long.
That's actually, guys, the
They're both
difference
3
between The
hours long.
Godfather, the Venn diagram is slowly merging. How did you feel about the end? Did you feel it was satisfying? Did you feel ready to watch 2 more?
Honestly, yeah.
I think I'd watch the second one.
I would definitely watch the second one because it's the only sequel to ever win Best Picture. So there has to be something good there. That's my logic. I'm also curious to see like the story for the first one's obviously already so long that I'm like, what do they do next in the second movie?
Yeah.
And also Marlon Brando's not in it, so I'm like, yeah, I can definitely give it a watch. Because God, Don Corleone is hard to watch.
Sort of like secondhand pains, like in my jaw, like just watching
It's just like
him.
that might have been the worst character choice.
It
Why
definitely
did you
did
do
not
that?
feel good.
No.
It felt like the whole time he was gonna accidentally spit out his dentures, and so I'm waiting to catch them. Can I say something like super cancelable in the film community? Like, I'm fine if you take my degree back. I get it. I don't think Al Pacino's a good actor in this. I just thought it was lackluster. I'm expecting like the performance of a lifetime. I'm expecting a monologue.
I think for the 70s, I think that it makes sense.
That's something worth noting too, is like it's hard for me to like
I don't think that it would be as sort of revered as of a performance today as it was then.
No. Well, I think that's what my
But
opinions on acting always fall back on, is I think actors today are just so much better than they were in the past. So it's hard for me to watch past actors and like compare them to like my perception of regular actors and be like, that's really good.
Yeah.
Like you have to wow me for me to be like amazing. But I will say like I do give a lot more grace to like black and white movies. Like Jimmy Stewart to me is like one of the best actors of all time. But obviously if you compare him to DiCaprio, it's like different leagues.
Well,
because Jimmy Stewart invented acting, whereas DiCaprio had people to lean off of and learn from of wide range.
Yeah.
And they do it well in every movie that they're in. So for this, I was like, Al Pacino.
No, the whole time I was
cutesy
like,
monologue.
Yeah.
Where's your monologue?
Like, Jeremy Allen White could do this so easy.
Yes.
Like
Oh my God. Yes.
Like Jeremy Allen White could do this in his sleep.
I'm just saying that. I'm saying I'm an Italian from New Jersey. If you took any one of my uncles, they would have acted circles around Brando in that role, purely because Brando was making character choices that made him look ridiculous. So when people talk about this movie, the only thing I'm okay with them being like, this is one of the best movies for X, Y, and Z is like story. I think the story was so well done. The book is so well done. Acting, you're losing me. Length, there was plenty of scenes where I was like, this could have been an email.
100%.
Why did you make that scene of him backing out of the car 30 minutes? Like,
Yeah.
it was so ridiculous. Also, it'd be such a more interesting paced movie if they made it snappy and jumpy, but it's the 70s, so I can't really,
Yeah.
their editing was like physical cutting, so I can't really down on them too much. But there was just things where I was like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I think that if this were to be made today, it definitely would have fast pacing. It's interesting
sure.
to me that they decided to make it like kind of a slow burn. I feel like if it were to be made today, it was like someone would get shot and killed in every scene.
Yeah.
Like this chose, like, even with the opening scene, me and Olivia were sitting there and the way he was speaking to him, I was like, he's about to get shot. He's not going to get shot. The pacing in the movie doesn't really comply with that. It feels like they wanted to build off of character, and then those slightly more like violent parts were spaced in a way where they would still be surprising and they'd still move the plot along, but you think more about the character than you do about the violence, which is interesting. Let's talk about the length of this film. Olivia says that it could be an email. I kept saying, as a joke, I kept saying I could do this in 20 minutes with Subway Surfers playing in the background. How I see this film impacting like the rest of cinema, besides With It Ends With Us, is probably just like showing you how you would do a 3-hour movie. And I think a lot of directors have taken inspiration from that. I mean, if you look at like Killers of the Flower Moon, that's sort of paced out similarly to me.
But that's the thing. Like, do they need to be paced out that way?
Did they need to make a movie?
Oh,
We're
no,
shredding
of course
it.
they didn't have to make a movie. And it's also kind of self-serving as an audience member to be like, seriously, you're asking a lot of my time to show me a 3-hour movie. And I don't agree with that. There are 3-hour movies that fly by. This was a 3-hour movie that could have been an hour and a half movie.
Yeah.
And it would have been amazing because the story is that good.
Well, that's my thing with, so I do think if you're going to do a long movie in this day and age,
1972.
no. Like today, 2024, you're doing a long movie, you have to have, I mean, I want to say purpose, but like all movies have purpose, whatever. But like really, like you have to have like a heart, like a message. Like Killers of the Flower Moon, there was like that was a movie that probably needed to be made, right? That's a story that needed to be told. I think with The Godfather, you could make it an hour and a half because does this do anything?
But it's not even like story important. It's like scene importance. Every scene was
like
important because it leads to the ending.
Right.
But it's like you don't need to show like 20 minutes of her getting beat. We understood that the problem is that she is a wife that is getting beat the first minute it happened. We don't need to see, like, it was just like they don't know when to cut.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, there isn't like reason why it needs to be 3 hours. For me, it's like it doesn't make sense to me that it's 3 hours. There are some movies that I watch and I go, this makes sense, there's 3 hours. Either it flew by or it's like all of these details that we had made sense or were necessary in some way to build character or whatever. But like a lot of this was like yeah, the beating your wife thing, we watched that for a long time. Like,
we get it,
we got it. It was just like, you could have cut, 30 minutes out of this movie and it would have felt faster.
I said that my favorite scene of this movie is when Sonny is at dinner with the family and they're talking business and Connie's like, can we not talk to business at the family? And he's like, shut up. And then the mom's like, don't interfere. My favorite scene in the movie, so not irrelevant, it's a very important scene, but it's like not the first one thing you would think of. Like you probably think of like the horse head or Sonny getting shot or like all of this stuff. The horse head is crazy. My favorite scene because it was the first time where I'm like, I got a lot of information in the span of 2 minutes. Let's go, baby. I don't have to think for a long time now because there's gonna be a whole bunch of other like buffer stuff. It was so well paced and executed. I got the point, and that's why it was very clear to me that like him beating his wife is gonna be a huge plot point, was because of that one little nippy moment. So important to me. The rest, I don't need to now see her being beat because she found out that he had a side hoe.
I think that like something that's interesting to think about, the 3 hours with movies, I am also a fan of a longer movie. I think that a lot of the time I boil it down to either artistic choice or like no one could tell them no, or a little bit of both.
Audacity.
Yeah,
A little bit of
a
both.
little bit of both. Yeah.
I think this movie for me is a little bit of both. I think it was an
Mhm.
artistic choice. I think there's definitely a version of this that's an hour and a half, but I think maybe the director wasn't interested in that version. And that's
Yeah.
interesting too. I also think that looking back in like the history of cinema, this movie came out in 1972. I wonder if we think that this could be communicated faster because we have a film literacy now in 2024 that is built off of movies like The Godfather. I don't know that people were
Yeah.
watching it in 1972 and hearing like a line and being like, hearing that line at the dinner table and being like, oh, he beats his wife. I don't know that they have this sort of like experiences with movies that would make them think that. It's interesting to think about how this movie might have impacted how we understand movies and also just like how a 3 hour movie is built.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'll probably never consider this one of my favorite movies of all time, because it doesn't stand the test of time for me. Because as a viewer in 2024, I'm watching that and I'm like, cool. I appreciate the impact. I appreciate the story. I said after I watched the movie, I would love to read the book. I bet the book is fantastic. I will say, I think this is a great movie to learn from.
I think it's maybe two different ways of building knowledge on movies. I mean, you can build knowledge off of movies from the 21st century and those which are built off of the movies from the 20th
Mhm.
century, or you
Yeah.
can build your knowledge of movies from the 20th century and go all the way through to the 21st century.
Mhm.
Right.
And those are just two different ways of going about it. I think that if you were interested in doing maybe a more in-depth or even just like chronological approach, then
Mhm.
this movie, if you're interested in the history of cinema, this movie is definitely worth watching. If you're interested
Absolutely.
in getting to know the 21st century ideals of movies, I think that this movie has influenced so many other movies that, it's interesting to think about like maybe you don't need to watch it if that's your perspective.
We are told to watch this movie
Mhm.
because of all it did and because a big part of our education has to do with film history, and you can't just like drop into like 2021 and be like, okay, so everything that happens in film is important past this year.
Mm.
You need to understand the history of it. But if you're just an avid film watcher and you don't really like slow movies and you don't like long movies, don't feel that you have to watch The Godfather because people say it's one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I get that. I think it just depends on who you are as, if you're a film student or just someone who is watching movies or whatever. I think it just depends on what you're trying to do and what you like. If you want to leave, film school and make It Ends With Us, you probably don't need to watch The Godfather. That's probably not going to affect you that much. But like if you want to be the next Martin Scorsese, yeah, probably watch The Godfather. That's probably
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
do
Yeah.
something. It just depends on what you want to make. And as a viewer, it's what you like. I will watch a crime movie if there is good character development. I'm a big character girl. If there's a good character development, I will probably enjoy it. I will probably have fun. I'm like, but if it's just plot, no. But that's just me. Those are things that I pick and choose, and I know that like I like this element and I like this element, but I maybe don't like that.
Did you like the character development in the sense that Michael got slapped across the face and his whole world changed?
I liked Michael's arc where he's like, this is my family, I'm not involved in it, and then he ends up being, the Don or whatever.
He's sort of
But
like
was there
Rory
even an
Gilmore.
arc? Like, I don't
I don't know
understand
that
how
there's an arc,
quickly it
but I like the
happened.
journey.
In 3 hours, it took
Yeah.
half a scene to get him to change. that
Oh,
feels
yeah.
like
That was
horrible
weird.
pacing that
That
I
was
wouldn't
strange.
necessarily want to learn from.
Yeah.
Like,
I do
that's
think
a
they should have
bad
leaned into that part more, but I also think
for
that
sure.
I took a 24-hour break, so maybe it felt like it was more developed.
Okay, that's true. You kind of
Because I
sat on
did it
it.
in my brain. But like, yeah, I do
Hailee
think
and I were like,
I
wait,
wish they leaned in.
seriously? He's gonna do this now? Like, where did this
Yeah.
even come from?
I liked
also,
that was the point though, where he hated it or like wasn't involved, and then by the end is involved. Like I
Oh,
get where
for
you were
sure.
going with
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that is like bare bones is a good idea. Do I think
Mhm.
it was executed as well as it could have been? No, but again, it's the 70s, and you know what? It probably was for the time.
I think that he's sort of Rory Gilmore-esque to me in
He
that
Rory
someone
Gilmore
was mean to him once and he was like, I'm changing everything about myself.
I'm quitting school.
I'm quitting school. I'm gonna
I'm
go live
gonna
with my
like get
grandma.
arrested.
Why did you drop out of Yale?
I think if the question of today is were the film bros right, I think the answer is for them. Like subjectively, it's
Yeah.
subjective. I
It's
think
like
that
a
what we're
subjective
learning
thing. Yeah.
is it's totally subjective. I don't think
Mhm.
that there's any movie that is, no matter how important it is to cinema, that every single person is going to sit down and be like,
Enjoys.
that was worth watching.
Yeah.
The Godfather for me was worth watching because I love movies.
Right.
And I might be more interested in the history of cinema than the average film goer.
Right.
But is some, other 22-year-old girl who studied, I don't know, like biology, does she need to sit down
no.
and watch The Godfather? If she
No,
wants
baby.
to.
Go to It Ends With Us.
No, babe. Go to It Ends With
No,
Us.
baby.
But
We know what
also,
you want to
if you
watch.
if you are a biology student who's like, I like mafia movies,
Then you
you
should
don't even
watch
really
it.
have to like you should probably watch this, but you don't have to start with The Godfather. You could probably
Yeah.
watch a more recent mafia movie that
Right,
is
what was that one
inspired
that came
heavily
out?
by The Godfather.
Before we conclude, I would just like to say, what simple favor would you ask Don Corleone on the day of his daughter's wedding when he literally cannot say no? I'll go first. His house and all his money.
It would
His
definitely
assets.
His assets.
I think his connections would be quite fun.
His connections.
I would like his contact list.
You want his
His Rolodex.
Rolodex. Yeah. Not his contact list.
I do.
All right. Well, I think, yeah, in conclusion, watch The Godfather if you want to. We watched The Godfather because we wanted to. And
I
because
give it a 6 out of 10.
Oh, and so there's that. And
I give it an F.
What'd you say? What would your numerical rating be? Mine's 6 out of 10.
I'd probably give it like an 8.
I think that I would give it on Letterboxd
That's
like
not
a
bad.
4.5.
I'd probably give it a 4.
Well, I
Work on
feel like
your
I just
math.
went on a tangent about how stupid you have to be to idolize a movie that is so horrible to women. So I'm not about to give it like a 9, even though I
No.
do think the movie was really good.
It's hard to get a 5 with me on Letterboxd, though. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not doing a 5.
I don't know what I have
Maybe
a
a
5 for
3.5.
other than Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
I have a 5 for Almost
What's
Famous,
funny is
which
like
I rewatched the other
I've
day.
valid.
Phenomenal movie.
I've given a 5 to a Netflix original movie. So like my taste is
Yeah, we know.
skewed. Like
We know.
It's what we sort of learned is like it's all subjective. Everything
It
depends
is.
on you. You can go into The Godfather with motives to learn about, the history of cinema, and that's awesome. You can go in because you like mafia movies, cool. I think that it all depends on how you're feeling. Are the film bros right for them? They're right for them. And that's,
that's a very diplomatic way of saying no.
for them. And
I think it's subjective.
And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I watched it for me.
I think that's going to be it from us.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We are so excited to announce that we have our Instagram up and running. It is in good hands with the current DTV board. If you look up on Instagram, DePaul TV Productions, that's where you'll be able to stay up to date on all of the fun projects DTV has in store. We highly suggest checking out our Instagram. That will be able to redirect you to our YouTube channel, to our podcast specifically, and everything in between. We have a lot of cool stuff going on, so give us a follow. And thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for watching and or listening.
And or listening.
And have a good day.
Have a lovely day.